This is David Maddox, political editor of The Independent here. I'm delighted to be joined by Kemi Badenoch, the frontrunner in the Tory leadership election, which we'll see if she emerges as winner in a few weeks' time. Kemi, if you don't mind if we just start off with some of the stories of the day or of the week. We had overnight the issue with Donald Trump accusing Labour of election interference in the United States, which, you know, there's been the usual accusations of kind of student politics on Labour side, but of course there's a tradition of Conservative and Labour and Democrats and Republicans crossing the Atlantic. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think they've overplayed their hand?
Well, I have been saying for a long time that this Labour government is full of student politicians. The way they talk, the things they say, it's as if they have not evolved since they were at uni. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, are on record as being very, very critical of President Trump. So I think that is the backdrop to what we have seen. If they had behaved as statesmen, if they had been statesmanlike and measured in their comments, then the actions of a few Labour activists, 100 or so, would not look so problematic. It's because of how they have behaved that this has become news. People do go abroad to help other people campaign, but it's quite often a lot more subtle. It's, you know, one person going in because they have a friend. It's the organising of big bands of people, I think, is unusual, but it is worse because of what Labour have been saying about our allies in the United States. They have not been statesmanlike or diplomatic.
So if you were leader, would you allow large numbers of Conservatives to do the same?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be organising it, but I believe that you should trust people. I believe in personal responsibility. No one should be doing anything illegal, so that we would certainly discourage and try to stop. But what I really want us to see is people building links with Conservatives in other countries. I had a great endorsement, for example, from Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida. No one else in the campaign has had that. I had Tony Abbott, the former Prime Minister of Australia, endorsing me. It's because we have good relationships, because we've worked together. So it is not unusual for people to do stuff for those they have relationships with. But how you do it is important. Being positive about something that you want to work for is better than trying to get somebody else or being critical of another side.
Okay, just on the subject of Mr. Trump, because he's had a very well publicised stunt this week of going and working in a McDonald's. I was just thinking, as a former McDonald's employee yourself, do you think that had value? There was people mocking him for it, but there were also people saying that, you know, this put him in touch with ordinary voters. What was your impression of that?
I think that if the potential leader of a country, or former leader, which he also is going to places like McDonald's, it is a good thing. It is showing that you understand that not everybody works in a high-flying corporate career or in a white-collar job. And it is signalling that you understand their lives. It is signalling that you understand their concerns. Anyone who is mocking that is the problem. And I had a lot of mocking when I said that I worked at McDonald's. People who sneer at these jobs often don't understand what others' lives are like, and they don't even understand how those jobs actually set a lot of people up for the future. I'm not the only politician who has worked at McDonald's, and I did go back there when I was a minister because I know what I learned there, and I'm proud of the experience that I got there.
You weren't tempted to put an apron back on when...
I put an apron on a couple of years ago, but no, not right now. Right now, I'm on the campaign trail, not in the kitchen.
Would you, if you were American, vote for Trump?
So I don't answer this question. I think that if you are somebody who is looking to be a world leader, looking to lead your country at some point, that you need to be very diplomatic. And I learned this because when I was Trade Secretary, I had lots of complaints from other countries who said, why do you keep interfering? Not me personally, but people in the UK, why do you keep commenting like this? That it's not helpful. We're all trying to do the right thing. And what I want to do is give myself the space to be able to work with whoever wins. So I'm not an American citizen. I'm not voting there. It is for Americans to choose. I would be happy to work with whoever is leader of the United States.
The other story this week has been the Chris Kaba case. Obviously, another complicated issue, which has brought up the whole kind of idea of institutional racism again. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think my views on institutional racism and the police are actually quite well known. I think that this is an issue, as sensitive as it is, I want to write about it if I can get some time on the campaign trail to set out more thoughts. But we need to back the police. What they do is extremely difficult. I remember when that case came out and the uproar and some of the fallout from the Black Lives Matter protests, which I was very much against. I didn't like what they stood for. I think we need to be very careful to ensure that the police are able to police properly. I don't agree with these comments that communities or the black community is traumatized. I think that most black people do not want gang members running their communities, and anything that can be done to make their lives safer, they will welcome.
I mean, you've spoken many times very eloquently on identity politics, and including in your speech at the conference, actually. And do you think this is a real issue, that the actual use of identity politics in the mainstream political discourse, or is it that this is a racist country, perhaps? Well, I mean, it seems to be becoming much more of a dividing line in recent years than it was maybe when you were first elected, actually.
I could see it becoming worse even when I was first elected. Identity politics is a scourge. We need to get rid of it. And different groups practice it. There's identity politics on the left, there's identity politics on the right. I hate both of it. We need to talk about the shared identity, which we all have, which is being British. Labour likes to whip up identity politics. They think that it helps them with minority groups and it adds to their vote. I lived in a place where everybody looked the same, but had different cultures, 300 different cultures and languages. Human beings will find conflict if you create difference. So I am determined to fight it. I did that throughout my career as a minister. I spoke out my first maiden speech, my very first speech in Parliament, talked about how I hated identity politics and how this was not a racist country. This is one of the best places in the world to actually be an ethnic minority. But we are a multiracial country, but I want us to work towards more of a shared culture. Multiculturalism is different from being multiracialism. And some cultures integrate, others don't. The more diverse you are, the more complicated it is. We are already a multiracial country. We're not changing that. We cannot change that. Let us start to work on what binds us together.
I suppose the other big issue, which you've been very much involved in, has been the trans debate. Do you understand why people have been offended by some of the things you've said, about saying that trans women are men, for example? Or is this just a line that we need to draw?
It is a line that we need to draw. We cannot start our politics by thinking what is not going to offend anybody. Everything will offend someone somewhere. We have to start from principles. This is one of the reasons why I am standing. I want a principles-first approach. Biological sex is a reality. Some people want to be treated as if they were the other sex. We understand that, and there can be rules around that, but a line has to be drawn somewhere. Saying that you can do whatever you want, you can go into women's spaces as long as you personally believe you're a woman or even just say you're a woman, is wrong. And politicians need to be strong enough to say that. We have a Labour government now that was too scared to say that biological sex is real. Keir Starmer saying 99% of women don't have a penis. This is nonsense. If you cannot speak the truth about something that even a little child understands, how will you speak the truth about what is more complex?
Okay, well, talk about children in that. My son is a big Doctor Who fan, so he saw a headline, about you having an argument with Doctor Who, and he said, why is Kemi attacking Doctor Who? But I mean, obviously it was on this issue. Obviously, he made the comments. David Tennant made those comments first at that awards evening, I believe. Were you surprised by that? Were you surprised by the kind of vociferousness?
I was surprised by it, and it was very important that I spoke up. One of the things that I have found is that there are a lot of women who feel voiceless. There are a lot of women who have been told to shut up. There are a lot of women who have been sacked from their jobs for asking for single-sex spaces, for women-only toilets, for saying the biological sex is real. If I, the Minister for Women and Equalities, as I was at the time, also shuts up because a TV actor tells me to, what signal am I sending to them? It was very important that I spoke up, and I think it's sad that it was written up as Kemi attacks Doctor Who, because what I was doing was actually defending women's rights. And this is what always happens to strong women. If you don't do as you're told, if you don't play ball, then they will come after you. And what I want people to know is that I'm pretty tough, I'm not scared, I will always do the right thing, and I won't be quiet when it is time to speak up. That is why I don't need to make promises about promising to do this and that. People have seen my record. They know that when things are tough and when things are bad, I will speak up. I have nothing to prove on that front.
Well, I'm glad you made that point about strong women, because over my time covering politics in Westminster, one of the things that has always astonished me is the way that strong women, particularly in the Conservative Party, and not just you, but you could say Suella Braverman and a few others as well, are treated very much like Marmite characters. There's this either love adoration or this kind of complete hate. And what is it about strong Tory women that provokes this sort of reaction?
I don't know. This is a tough question. I mean, you tell me, David. We're just being ourselves, and I think that the stronger the personality and the more unusual the politician, the more likely they are to get very strong reactions from people. And actually, I think that that's something that's going to be very helpful for us to cut through in opposition. We need a leader who's going to cut through. We need a leader who stands out for the right reasons, somebody who can communicate, somebody who has values that people will instinctively and immediately understand.
Okay, because your critics will often describe you as abrasive or a difficult person. Of course, famously, Margaret Thatcher was called that difficult woman. I suppose the question is, with that sort of, I'm not saying that's your personality, but with that sort of reputation, are you able to unite the party, or does that really matter?
I can definitely unite the party. And it's interesting that these critics never come out in public. Or when they do, I was criticised for spending too much time with my children. It immediately becomes obvious who is in the right. So let's put aside the anonymous sources. Let's look at who is actually coming out to support me. I have support from across the spectrum. Former chair of the TRG, that's the left-wing One Nation group, Damien Green is supporting me. Former chair of the ERG, the European Research Group, Steve Baker is supporting me. I have two former party leaders, William Hague, Ian Duncan Smith. These are not people who are left-wing. These are people who, just left-wing or just right-wing. These are people who are coming from across the political spectrum. I am firmly on the right of the party, but I understand that not everybody is going to agree with me on everything. And I think the way to unify the party is not to say, here are my policies, and if the majority of the party membership vote for it, it's my way or the highway. That is a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for more infighting. And the one thing that members have said everywhere I've gone throughout the country is that they are sick and tired of infighting. No one votes for divided parties. They have various views about policies. They understand why we may have done some things they didn't like, and so on. But the one thing that unites all the members is just fury about how we just kept attacking each other. And that is why I have made it a requirement of my campaign. We're not attacking any other candidates. We don't care if they attack me. There are all sorts of people who are supporting my opponent right now who are attacking me. This blue on blue is what destroyed us. I think the members will see who are the people who are bringing peace and harmony and who are the ones who are going to carry on the infighting. But there's only one unity candidate in this election.
So you take a more collegiate approach then to policy?
I always do, and that is why all of the ministers who worked with me in the Department for Business and Trade are supporting me. whether they're ex-MPs or current MPs, ministers like Kevin Hollinrake, Nigel Huddleston, Andrew Bowie, Alan Mack, Greg Hands, former party chairman who was in the department. If I was so abrasive, if I was so rude and terrible, all of those people would disappear. And actually, if you look at other candidates, they didn't have their teams supporting them. They had their teams running against them. And I think that that's quite an important fact.
So what do you say to people who say that this final shows that the party has moved to the right with you and Robert? Because, I mean, we'll get on to policies or lack of policies in your campaign in a moment, but, he's certainly promoting leaving the ECHR, for example. You're very much, we've discussed what you've said about the kind of culture wars issues. Do you think that represents the party itself, the feeling within the party, or is it a reaction to reform?
So I tell people that it's not about left or right anymore. It's about right and wrong. And if we focus on that, we will see what is happening. That the party has created these false binaries. Well, if you'll leave, you're right, and if you'll remain, you're left wing, which wasn't true. Boris Johnson was on the left of the party. He was very liberal on immigration, more high spending. He called himself a one nation conservative. And yet he was portrayed as being on the right because of Brexit. We need to stop these false labels and these false binaries. Let's talk about the common ground, where we can get the majority of people to support us, where we can show a vision and direction for how we are going to take the country forward.
So how does that deal with the threat of Farage and reform? Because let's be honest about it, you lost votes to the Lib Dems and Labour, but actually you lost more votes from people staying at home and going and voting for reform. And, how do you get Conservatives back from those positions?
So I do think the first step back in winning a coalition that is of the centre-right is to go to those people who are former Conservative voters who went to reform. And that is why I never attack reform voters. I think that it is important that we remember that they were our people, and I hope that they still are. When I was knocking on doors in my constituency, I wasn't finding Labour people going to reform. It was former Conservatives who were going to reform. And why did they do that? It was because we broke promises on things like tax and immigration. They're not going to come back if we just have some more promises. They will come back if they can trust us. That is why I am starting with rebuilding trust. No one trusts a divided party. Let's unify the party, not just for its own sake, but behind something. That is why my campaign is about renewal and first principles. What do we all agree on? Freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of association, equality under the law, whatever you look like, no two-tier policing. Let's talk more about family, it's critical. Let's talk about what real citizenship means, not just having a passport. These are the things that we need to go back to first principles on. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have policies. It doesn't mean that we don't even have policies right now. We have a policy on the winter fuel payment, for example. We will be able to react to what Labour is doing. But we are not the government. This is not a general election. The policies Keir Starmer had in 2020 have all fallen by the wayside. I could give you all sorts of policies now. How do you know that I'm going to deliver them? You need to look at the character and the conviction of the person you want to vote for, not just what they're promising today. And that is how we will get reform voters back. If they think, this woman gets us, she understands our concerns, and actually, on her record, she's done well. There's no scandal here. She wasn't sacked from any job. There's no integrity issue, no weird, funny donor. Everything's transparent. This is somebody with character. This is somebody with integrity. We will put our trust in her. She's unifying her party. All right, let's hear what she has to say. It isn't me forcing myself through, here are my new policies, what do you think? They're not going to listen to that. Let's get real.
Would you then rule out leaving the ECHR?
No, I have never ruled it out. I think we will probably have to leave the ECHR. But leaving the ECHR isn't just us saying we're leaving by. It is a complicated process. If we left today, we would not deport any more people, because that wasn't the only reason that was given for the Rwanda plan working. There are other things like the Refugee Convention, Modern Slavery Act, the Human Rights Act, and so on and so forth. We also have a problem with legal activism, where there are lawyers, Keir Starmer is one example of them, there are lawyers in this country who work actively to undermine our immigration policy. He wrote letters asking us not to deport people who went on to commit more serious crimes. That is what we have in our government now. We need to look at ourselves first. Let's look at the domestic legislation. If we need to leave the ECHR, yes, we will, but it is not a silver bullet. And that is why I wrote very strongly about what a wholesale immigration plan looks like. If you think that one thing is going to fix it, then you're only going to be disappointed. I will not make any promises unless I know exactly how we will deliver them.
You mentioned two-tier policing there. Do you think we have two-tier policing?
Well, it's an accusation that has been around for a long time. Stop and Search is accused of being two-tier policing. We need to make sure that we show that we are treating everybody equally. This equality under the law principle is absolutely key. And I think that Keir Starmer got his response to those Southport riots wrong by focusing on the mistake that the people made in terms of identifying the perpetrator, rather than focusing on a huge tragedy has happened. We know people are concerned. We are going to do what we can to make sure these things aren't happening in our country. We understand that. Saying that first, before calling everybody far right and where we're going to lock them up and throw away the key. And also, I do think we need a better understanding of how sentencing is working in this country, where some people who commit significant crimes look like they're let off, and others who commit minor crimes look like they go to prison. It is very complicated. It depends on, is it a magistrate's court? Is it a crown court in terms of how speedily justice is served? People don't understand it anymore. And we have to start talking in a way that the people understand and not get bogged down in managerialism.
One of the things, Levers, I think you referred to the Christopher Chope business about you supposedly need to be spending more time with your children.
Well, all I want to do is spend time with my children, which my husband is actually doing most of the childcare right now, and he heard that and thought, what on earth is this?
Yeah, because we referred to the difficult woman type thing on one side. But then we get the other side, which again only seems to be ever levelled at female politicians, which is that you're the puppet of Michael Gove, and I appreciate most of the people who watch this won't know this name, but Dougie Smith is always a name that comes out, and all this sort of business.
It is very strange, but it hasn't just started. It's been happening since I first became an MP, but the criticism wasn't coming from the right then, it was coming from the left. When I gave my maiden speech, I won an award for Speech of the Year. And a lot of people on the left, a lot of the Black Labour MPs said, I won't name the specific ones, someone wrote that speech for her, couldn't possibly be her, nobody would write that. When people can't do something themselves and they see someone else who they don't expect to be able to do it, doing it very well, they don't want to feel like, oh, this person can do this better than me. They want to find a reason. Oh, someone must be helping her. Otherwise, she could never have done this. The idea that I, a junior minister, just ran for leader 2 years ago and did so well, I beat former chancellors, former home secretaries, was very strange for a lot of people. They just couldn't understand it. How did she do it? And of course, he supported me in that contest. He's not around anymore. So they looked for a reason, oh, well, we don't like this guy, and he's supporting her, he must be behind it all. And I think that's sad, that when people are successful, to look for a conspiracy theory to explain their success instead of just saying, this person has done well, what can we learn, or just acknowledging that. But it does happen to a lot of women, but most people don't believe these things because they have seen me being consistent for a long time. I'm not saying anything new. Because I've been talking about these things since before I became an MP, and people know where I stand. They know where I stand on women's rights. They know where I stand on gender ideology. They know where I stand on net zero. When everybody else was clapping net zero, I was in the parliament saying, why are we doing this? What does this mean? So I don't need to prove myself. What is interesting is that when someone else comes in with new views that they never had before, no one's asking, oh, well, where did this come from? But whatever happens, people are always going to challenge my beliefs. I need to show that I have that conviction. I'm not worried about what they say. There will always be criticism. I need to make sure that I'm always doing the right thing.
I mean, is it misogyny?
I don't know. So I don't like using the isms unless I have gone through every other possibility. So I never say, oh, this person is doing this because of race, racism or sexism, until there is genuinely no other explanation. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I like to look for the best possible interpretation of their motives. And this often means that people think that I'm excusing certain behavior, but I just actually think that it creates better trust. So is it misogyny? I'm not sure. I think that there are better explanations, and one of them is that there are certain people who want to be, they feel they've been overlooked, they want to be the ones in charge, they want to be the ones who do the picking, and anyone who comes in from left field who they think is breaking the rules, they don't like.
So we mentioned the parallels made to Margaret. Do you feel that you are a kind of Margaret Thatcher for the 21st century? I mean, certainly some people do. And what would, I mean, you've talked about re-engineering the Conservative Party. It's a lovely phrase. What does that mean, though?
So people make a lot of comparisons, and to be honest, you can find things in common. You pick any two politicians, you can actually often find a lot in common. The comparisons with Lady Thatcher are flattering, but I am Kemi. I'm not her. We have similarities. She was a scientist. I was an engineer, for example, and she set out, with that Stepping Stones document, which you worked with Keith Joseph on, just a framework for the future. That is what I want us to do. What has been amazing is that the people who have been making the Margaret Thatcher comparison the most are the ones who knew her. People like Michael Forsyth, David Davis, Rocco Forte, who was a businessman who knew her very well, Charles Moore, her biographer. These are the people who knew her, say they see a lot of her in me. That is very flattering, but I'm Kemi. I'm not Maggie, I'm Kemi.
So if a handbag was Margaret Thatcher's kind of symbol, what would Kemi's symbol be?
I don't know. Maybe the glasses, which I'm not wearing now. Maybe the braids, the headphones, my wireless headphones. Those I'm trying to think of what do I always have. What do I always have with me? I'm not sure other than that.
Just to wrap up, let's just look at another issue that's coming up: assisted dying, which obviously is not a. It's a free vote. It's not a party political issue. But where are you on that? What are your instincts on that?
So I have been in the past a patron of Conservatives for choice at the end of life. So I do support the principle of very limited circumstances where somebody wants to choose how they go, they can do so because of what I saw happen to a family member. And she died in the most awful way. And I just thought, how could we have let this happen? We knew that was what she wanted, and we couldn't help her. And even now, just thinking about it, it's very upsetting. So I support the principle, but, and this is where a lot of people think that I'm overly nuanced. I think that the system, a lot of the systems in this country are broken. NHS needs reform. We can't deliver social care. Can we actually handle assisted suicide on top of all that? And this is where my biases and political prejudices come in. If it was a Conservative government, I would feel more confident that we are better at this. It's a Labour government, it's a private member's bill, they're rushing it through, what's it going to look like? So I don't know how I'm going to vote on this bill. I know what I believe. I think that there are limited circumstances. I don't think Labour can deliver. But I also know that we are very bad at safeguarding in this country. There's a lot of tick boxing and process. But I am still scarred by how so many children were sterilised, they had their organs, their reproductive organs removed, and there were safeguards there, and they weren't trans. They were just gay children, a lot of them with autism. Where were the safeguards for them? So if we couldn't have safeguards for those kids, are we going to have safeguards for the people who have a terminal illness? Because that's the only circumstance I think it should be allowed. Who have a terminal illness and just want to make sure they go away or they pass away as peacefully as possible. I'm not sure. This is what I will be testing.
The other non-party political kind of ethical issue that's likely to come up in the next year or two is also the decriminalisation of abortion, which has similar sort of splits, obviously, at the different end of life issue. But where are you on that?
The law is fine as it is. I don't want us to get into the sort of arguments they have in the US They are so toxic. We had laws put in place which are working fine. I've had 3 children. I know people who have had abortions. I know how tough it can be. We need to give people the space to do so if it is not right for them. But we also know that after 24 weeks, babies can survive. And we need to be very careful about just pushing the boundaries into places that are just unethical. Let's leave the law as it is. The things that are causing problems in this country are not abortion. So let's leave that alone, leave the law as it is.
Just on a broader point on this, do you worry that some of that Americanisation of politics is coming into this country
It already has.
on these issues?
It already has, because of social media. There's no information border anymore.
Just to finish off with, we always like people we interview to tell us their choice of books. What are you reading at the moment?
I'm reading WhatsApps, David. That's all. I read information. The idea that I have any time to read fiction is for the birds. I am so busy. And it's one of the most frustrating things when you can't be anywhere in a campaign. Yesterday, I had multiple clashes. I tried to do as many as possible. And people saying, oh, you're not here. You're not there. Why aren't you doing this? Because I'm doing something else. Many people forget that I'm still the shadow housing secretary. And, you know, I have to look at what Angela Rayner is putting forward. So I have to read all those policy documents. We have a bill that's going through Parliament. I have to make sure we know what the amendments are, what the position is. I'm still doing the COVID inquiry. I'm still doing the post office inquiry. And my opponent is not doing those things. So he does have more time to go out and do media. I am doing my job as well as running for leader. And it just goes to show how many things I can juggle at the same time. But sacrifices need to be made. One of those sacrifices is books.
Excellent stuff. Well, look, thank you very much, Kemi Badenoch. We will find out on November the 2nd if you've been successful or not, but it's been a pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you, David.